everybody, and welcome to the show. We are just a few days before the American midterm elections. We're also going to talk about various aid projects and have a bit of a report on what's going on in the Ukraine. We're going to talk about the midterms in America and what that may mean for aid aid into the Ukraine war, and also how it might affect Poland itself and Central Europe. Is that okay with you, Phil?
Fine with me.
That's why we're here. We're here to jaw.
Are we now?
I think so.
Well, good.
Yeah. But we're not going to jaw alone. This is Philip Goss.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Who's been very active in the businessman, entrepreneur, farm owner in Indiana. So a man of the salt of the earth, we call him.
Landed gentry, I prefer.
Landed gentry, you prefer? Oh, yeah, you see? Immediately, you join in the oligarchy.
Well,
Give a guy a little land and he joins the oligarchy immediately. Or are you a yeoman?
I used to be, and I pretend to be.
You say like, yo, man, get over here.
No, I don't.
You're not a yeoman. Okay, so, yeah. And also we have on the horn, from Bydgoszcz, we have Tony McFarlane Gonzalez. Welcome to the show, Tony. I'm almost concealed. I'm not wearing my glasses today because I forgot them at home. But then I realized that maybe it's psychological because I wrote my notes for the show without my glasses. So this is one for Sigmund Freud, no doubt. And we also have Olgierd Ujiembo, which is, say that 5 times fast, Phil.
That.
No, not that. The name. Oh, you pulled that old joke on me.
Well, sorry.
I'm never leaving myself open for that one again. At any rate, yeah, so the midterms are coming up, and then it looks like, according to what I'm seeing on American television, it looks like we have a choice between either communism or fascism. At any rate, whoever wins, democracy will be over. I was watching the comedian Bill Maher with his show Real Time, and he seems convinced that if the Republicans win, as it looks like they're going to, that democracy will be over. This is along the lines of a lot of Democrats are saying. Of course, the Republicans are saying exactly the opposite. If the Democrats were to win, democracy is over. I think it's this choice between communism or fascism. Hard to choose. At least in one, the trains run on time. At least you have trains in one of them.
I'm a member of the Throw the Bums Out party.
You're the Throw the Bums Out party.
Yes.
I agree. But seriously,
all the bums. It
is a Hobson's choice, isn't it? It's extreme. This is extreme. This kind of opinion on either side. I think democracy and republicanism will live. Republicanism with a small r, no matter who wins. I think the Constitution.
And democracy with a small d.
I think so. Yeah, and the Constitution and the founding documents and the principles are strong enough to withstand these different people. And the people got to stop. Bill Maher is talking about, I'm just so afraid of Trump. Stop it.
It's not Trump. It's the followers who are following a narrative, a clearly propagandized narrative. Yeah. And not to say that there isn't one on the other side, but
there is.
That's part
what
of the
I just said at the top.
Is that both sides, the extremes on both sides, which really represent the same outcome,
they're both populist risings against the elite insider trading that's going on.
And against the rational sentiment.
General insider trading.
Yes.
We're in the club, you're not, and we're going to keep the doors closed.
Also known as kleptocracy.
Correct. How did that happen? How did America become a banana republic?
I believe it all began in the 80s.
No? It wasn't when Father refused to take certain people to the circus?
Well, it might have been that as well.
Yeah.
But
there
was NPR's Planet Money actually can pinpoint a date, and it was sometime in the Reagan administration, and it was when they allowed CEO compensation to be pegged to stock performance, and that gave certain economic signals which didn't necessarily mean that they were acting in the best interest of the company, but rather in the best interest of stock price and shareholders, because then they were able to increase their own
Well,
compensation
yeah,
by decreasing.
the deregulation of the markets. It's happened in Britain. It happened in the United States. The same exact time, and it changed society. That's a very good point, and one that I'm very fond of talking about and raising for years, actually. Okay. At any rate, if we're going to go extreme, I'd settle for extreme fairness. How about you? Can we have some extreme fairness for a change?
Yes.
Can we not forget about everybody who doesn't have a big stock portfolio? Can we stop? Can we do a little more Adam Smith and defend our entrepreneurs
The
and
more
farmers?
we get money out of politics and the more we get into term limits, the fairer life will be.
Thank you, sir. Very good point, and I second that. I don't know how Tony, how are you out there? How do you feel about that? What we're talking about?
I absolutely agree with term limits. It should have been implemented a long time ago. And that's how I'm always wondering. We had side conversations here. We're just saying, how can these career politicians be in politics for over 40 plus years when their terms are only, some of them, 4 to 6 years, and they continue to be prolific in there and making the same decisions?
Well, it's a good point. It's a good point. A very good point. Well taken. Senators in for 6 years, and House of Representatives, they're running every 2 years. Are you kidding?
Yeah, exactly.
We should just replace them every 2 years.
Congress.
You know, the idea of it should be, gosh, I don't want to go to Washington, but I have to do it. It's my duty.
Like jury duty.
Like jury duty. There you go. And this is if we're going to go back to our founding principles, which are based on Greco-Roman principles, that was kind of the way in the great periods of republic they looked at things. Was it not, Mr. Ugiembo? Professor, I should say.
Well, with that professor, really, whatever. For me, it's the most important thing is that people should not be just professional politicians. That's the problem. I don't know. Biden does he remember Jimmy Carter times?
Does who remember?
Biden.
Was he already a politician then?
Who?
Biden.
Biden? Biden's been in since '72.
He
So he
remembers
remembers
Nixon.
Jimmy Carter. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, he's just 10 years younger than Jimmy Carter or something. Yeah.
I remember one thing, that when we were kids, we were always making fun of Russians having really old
15.
gerontocracy at the top.
Yeah.
I'm afraid the Western world, especially America, went that way too. It's worrying, actually.
Gosh, that's a great point. That is a great point. There's a point where wise heads, reflective heads can be fine in, say, the courts and other things like that, but you need a little more dynamism and contact with the populace, don't you?
Yeah, so there is something in the system that leads the oldest ones to take office. I don't know, from Nancy Pelosi to Donald Trump. Even if I like one of them and I don't like the other one, they're both too old.
Yeah, like, I want to say that, echo what he's saying, and it's right in the Constitution. For the people, by the people. And they have completely and utterly forgotten that, and they've gone away from that.
Well, why should we forget that? That's a great point.
And to that point, we have minimum age requirements for House of Representatives, for Senate, and for the President. Should we not also have maximum ages?
Yes, we should.
Yeah, so like 100?
Yeah.
Or 105. We don't want to be accused of centenarialism. I don't know. I just made that.
That's called ageism.
Ageism, yeah.
It's called ageism?
Well, there's ageism against the young. You can't be president at age 28.
Yeah, but that's for good Lord. That's a good idea. But I mean, I'm not even sure.
So is it not a similarly good idea not to have a 90-year-old president?
It's 35, isn't it, to be president?
Whatever it is, 28 is too young, and 90's probably too old.
Hey, you're still working at Starbucks these days at 28.
Well, yes.
You haven't even got to manager yet.
Unless you're from New York City.
Yeah, okay.
Then you can be congresswoman.
I'm just joking with the millennials there. I was a millennial once. So were you. No, we weren't.
No.
No, we weren't. We weren't ever millennials because it didn't exist back in the, we were around. I knew Fred Flintstone personally. Yeah. I used to bowl with him and Barney, Mr. Rubble. I called him Mr. Rubble. You know, he was sensitive. So, yeah, this is a good point. If we look at the elections, we'll talk about aid at the end and some of the things that you've been doing and Tony's been doing, because I don't think you want to talk too much about what you've been doing, but we'll just give people a snapshot at the end. But we'll continue with this political stuff, because as I say, we're on the brink of an election. How much do you think put my earpiece back in. Actually, I was just scratching my back.
Patting your back.
Patting myself on the back, yeah, as Dr. Phil says. How much do you think the Republicans... Okay, let's say this. Who's going to win the election? Let's ask that question of you all. Tony, who's going to win? You said Democrats the last time. Who's going to win?
Most to lose. That's the right answer. Who has the most to lose? Who has their hands in the pockets, books of the conglomerates that are feeding them? Who has the most to lose if they lose the election?
I don't know. Who does? Is that like the riddle of the Sphinx? Yeah.
It sort of is like the riddle of the Sphinx, but it actually is quite.
It's a riddle.
This because the Republicans are all in bed with a lot of the conglomerates that are feeding the government entities, and the same with the Democrats.
Well, no, the elites of both parties are the same. That's kind of the point I was making before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's all up down to the American public. So far, right now, all the polls are saying Republicans are going to take it over. That's what they said last time, and then it's democratically controlled now. I mean, it's the lesser of two evils here. So everything's leading towards Democrats, and it all depends on the people and how they're going to swing it.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you when we talk about isolationism and how isolationism and George Washington's farewell address, and how that the founding fathers regarded the kind of problems we're looking at now, because they thought about them. That's why the system is the best system ever created for government. They thought long and hard, and they were some of the most brilliant people of all time, which makes you wonder, was it an accident? Or is there really a force in charge that organizes these things? And where will the force take us? So at any rate, Philip, who do you think?
I've got to think that whatever the polling may say, and remember, I don't know how reliable any polling is, because I think people have a lot of aversion to answering poll questions nowadays, given that...
Being honest about it.
Being honest about it, and also just answering anything.
Good point.
Because they're not really certain who's doing what polling and how that data might be used
against them.
Yeah. And so I think that, first off, polling itself is a more difficult art today than it was in years past. Secondly, I think that the basic challenge that the Republicans have is their attack on women's rights, reproductive rights, and individual body autonomy. And that's a slippery slope that they start here, but where does it end? And I think it needs to end here, and I think the women are quite rightfully angry at having
Women are
autonomy.
always angry about something.
Right, but this
if
time
you've ever
they're
been married, you know that. So, I mean, I think that the issue of abortion is very, this has been, abortion and death penalty have been the major issues since the 70s.
Let's use the correct words. Abortion is part of it, but it's about body autonomy.
Well, then you can't make people take vaccines. Come on. I mean, do you really want to go there?
And
not
that is
not
the
right
same.
Now. It's another
It is
show.
the same argument. And I know people who were both anti-abortion and anti-forced vaccinations, but who have said basically they are more pro-body autonomy than they are pro-draconian government policy. And so they'll give up on the abortion idea to maintain their body autonomy with regard to vaccines. My own sister is one of those people.
So she's willing to say, I am for the repeal of Roe v. Wade so that I can also be anti-vaccine.
Well, there's a question about...
Not anti-vaccine, but other people can have it. I get my own choice.
There's
That's
a question. There's, I think, a legitimate legal legislative question about Roe v. Wade, and that is, at what point do we allow the courts to legislate, and at what point do we enact proper legislation? Because allowing courts to establish some type of establish law, not interpret
Okay,
law,
but,
is
yeah.
a different question. And that's what Roe v. Wade ultimately did.
No, Roe v. Wade is a federal decision by the Supreme Court. It's not a law. That's number one.
That's exactly the point.
The law is up to the states now. It's been thrown back to the states where it should be, in my opinion. The states need a lot more autonomy in making these kind of decisions.
States can and are irresponsible with their activities, as we know. And one of the problems we have in the U.S. was when the Supreme Court rejected the Voting Rights Act.
So localities
and so
also?
now that the Voting Rights Act is no longer in force, we see all types of Jim Crow laws and gerrymandering that's worse than it used to be.
No, I don't agree with that. I don't
You
see.
don't
I
think
don't.
that
No,
certain southern states
I
are-
don't think that there's. I think this Jim Crow thing is ridiculous. There is no Jim Crow.
So when
that's
certain
from the
states
50s. It's a
don't
totally different.
have
We had a black
adequate-
president. We
No, I feel exactly like
We had a
Polish
black
public
president.
watching Americans.
Come on.
You're bickering about things. I don't get it.
Tell us what you don't get. Come on, my dear. Jump in.
No, I understand the whole quarrel, but from outside, for us, from here, where we are now, the important question is the wing of the Republicans that is obviously anti-war, is it going to be the empowered one now after the elections? Because there were some voices in the Republican Party
Okay.
that were against supporting Ukraine, in general or in some particular instances.
Okay, let's get back to that subject because I didn't want to talk about what we got into. I love the subject, but it's a whole show. And as I said, death penalty.
Well, we can quarrel about Poland the same way because we have our own Roe v. Wade, right?
Yeah, I know. And it's a legal morass. It's also a moral problem. And when you put the two together, that's why nobody can solve this. And we're not going to
Yes,
solve it here.
that's all becomes bickering now. I understand it is about the life of a person or body independence of a person. Okay, I understand that. But for me right now, the important part is even if one or the other party wins, what will happen
Well, the
here?
reason why that's important is because that is one of the major issues that will push women as a major part of the electorate, let's just say half, towards the Democratic Party this election
Yeah, because
round.
the Democratic Party is not stating the case as it is, because you can still get an abortion. It's state by state, and that's a fact. Okay, whether you agree,
I have a question.
he's from the
actually.
north,
not
I'm from
sure
the
that we can
south. We have
accept this.
different views on federalism. That's ingrained. What?
No, my question is because I have seen a lot of women actually not being for the general abortion rights.
Yeah, I don't want to get. Let's move away from that and go back to your very good question.
Okay, let's get
bring
back-
Tony in because Tony has a lot to say on this too, because he's an expert on security. So the idea is, how will a Republican victory, if there is one, right now it looks like they will win the House, and the Senate could be any, depending on turnout, depending on the ballots being counted accurately over a period of days, and how close that is. We may have to wait a while to find out what the result is, and there will be, no doubt, several, maybe 5 or 6 very close elections in states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and New Hampshire, I think, are the main ones, are they not? So we may be waiting some time to see whether it's similar to what it is now, or the Democrats or Republicans manage to eke out victories in some of these Senate races. But it's going to be a close-run thing. We're going to have to wait a few days, most likely. Do you agree with that?
I do.
Dr. Phil agrees. Do you agree with that, Tony?
It's going to be very close.
Yeah, it's going to be very close. Okay, so we don't know yet. What we do know is that we still have this divide, and things are very close. And the question comes back to what Olgierd has said, which is, how is that going to affect things here in Central Europe? How's it going to affect Poland? How's it going to affect aid for the war? Now, this is a central question. May I quote a couple of statistics for you? 62% of Americans in a Forbes poll, this is Forbes magazine poll, Forbes in the United States, 62% of Americans are following war news regularly, of those interviewed. Just over 50%, 53% of Americans believe that it is in the United States' interest to aid the war in a country like Ukraine where they're fighting for democracy. But that's a pretty substantial amount on the other side who are not for it. A lot of that probably includes isolationists. Isolationists. But my I appeared on another program, and there was a fellow from American Policy Institute in Washington, and he was saying, no, it's not the problem, Phil and Olgerd and Tony, is not that whether the United States will continue aid. That's not the problem. The problem is whether Europe is going to step in and to provide aid through the winter in the way that they need to, in terms of money, not even munitions so much, but money towards the Ukrainian government to help sustain them through this very difficult time in the winter. It's going to be difficult.
But it's
Yes.
not about money to sustain the winter. It's the infrastructure. I mean, you can throw the money at it. It's paper. Getting the actual materials to actually get the infrastructure back to a logical level to actually sustain the people is the major issue that the Ukraine is facing. They have the money. And also there's another part to this money factor is the accountability of the money, where the money's going to go. There is no accountability in the Ukraine.
This is what I said, Tony, if I may. This is what I said, because in Washington they don't know. We're here on the ground. We're experts. We speak the language to some extent, at least Phil does, and I do okay, and you do. So, and I know Olgerd pretty good, not only on Polish, but on English and Chinese and Russian and a number of others. So Olgerd is our resident genius. But so in Washington, he's saying, oh, well, what's Europe going to do? And I said, well, like people have not attacked, but they've put a spotlight on what Representative McCarthy said, who will be the leader in the House if the Republicans win. What Representative McCarthy said was that accountability is needed. This is the main thing. He didn't say, we're not going to supply them. He just said, we want them to be accountable in Ukraine. And you've just said it yourself without any prompting from the chair or from Phil.
Well, I might add, not only in Ukraine, but also any organization purporting to aid Ukraine could be full of profiteers.
Yeah, and who would know better than you or Tony on that, because you're both very deeply involved in the aid effort, working with various different organizations, doing different things, but mostly in humanitarian aid that is moving people and working to solve problems of the wounded who need replacement parts, if you will. And there's a lot of that. And this is a very admirable effort that I'd just want to single you both out for your amazing efforts in this area and how you do it quietly. You haven't talked about this looking for publicity. There's nothing on the media, social media, about you doing this. You do it behind the scenes, and this is the way all of these things should be done. Also to keep security. Also to keep security, right? Very important in these matters.
We thank you for that, Will. We don't like to take accolades. That's why we're called the quiet professionals. We work underneath, and we don't need anybody to tell us what to do. We work for free. We really don't want that because it's what is right to do.
That's right. It's the right thing. And some people still know the right thing. Now, when it comes back to the elections, we're going to have to end the segment in a minute. But when it comes to elections, we need to also do the right thing. And our elites need to start doing the right thing. There is what Washington and the early Republicans with a small r, who founded the United States, the main thing the founding fathers feared was a political parties becoming too powerful and bossing the people around from a federal level, and getting away from local. Well, you need a representative control, but the representatives must be limited by the will of the people, and they believed in the will of the people, and that is, at that time, was of course not including everyone, because women couldn't vote, and of course slaves couldn't vote, and things like that. But the principle was there, and both of these things would be worked out, one before the other, in time, as everyone knows. It's worth reading, for example, Washington's farewell address to really have a handle on what the founding fathers were focused on, and what George Washington himself, who was one of the most humble people of all time, because he said, I don't really think I should be president. I don't want to be king, that's for sure. They want to make him king. He said, I don't really want to be president for the first term, let alone a second term. Please, I'm going to go back and make some beer and go back to my farming, because he was a great beer maker. At any rate, he's a good man, false teeth and all. We'll be back after this break with more about the upcoming elections, and we'll hear a lot more from Mr. Ujiembo about these origins of American democracy, with roots in Poland and help from two of Poland's most important 18th century figures. See you after the break. Enjoy these important messages. They keep us on the air. Right, caught me shuffling papers. I'm just trying to look like I'm actually busy. It's a trick. I'm actually thinking about something. Welcome back in studio, Philip G. Goss. We don't know what the G stands for.
There isn't, because it isn't there.
There isn't? There's no G?
L, but it's...
It's an L?
When
did you change that?
I didn't.
Are you sure?
Yes. It's inconsequential.
God, can I see a driver's license, please?
You can see a business card.
Yeah, can I see a business card? Well, okay, after the show, I want to see that business card, because I was sure it was a G, and apparently it's Lee.
Correct.
I'm just kidding you.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, and we also have Mr. Olgierd Ujiembo. I call him Mr. He's really a professor. He's the smartest man ever on this show, and that includes he's much smarter even than these Policy Institute people that I talk to on another network, and I'm gonna stick with that because it's true. The man is fast, and equally fast, a man who knows more about danger than Danger Man himself, as played by Patrick McGowan, Tony McFarland Gonzalez. Welcome back, gentlemen. What a great pleasure to have you for a second half of the show as we approach American midterms, and the question on everybody's lips: how will a Republican victory affect Central Europe and the war in Ukraine? What say you, Olgierd?
Well, you ask me. You are the American. You should know.
What? But we're
You're the American. You should know. How can I? From
Great
where
Scott, I
sit,
ask a question about Central Europe.
Saying that we should not support Ukrainians that much, or maybe Poland should support them more with money. Come on, how can you imagine that?
Okay,
if you ask,
this is a good point. Hold on.
Support Iran with sand.
Olgierd, hold on, because we're losing you, and this is a very good point, which was raised in another discussion I had. Poland should give more money.
Yeah, that Poland should give more money to Ukrainians. It's like as if you are
I heard this from an American government policy advisor, yes. Yeah.
Yes, Eskimos to support Iran with sand. Or
yeah, well, no, and I raised the point.
With sand.
I raised the point with him that you've already had, Poland is giving an immense amount of aid in the sense that they have taken on millions of refugees. Who's paying for that? Well, the government's putting a lot of money, and private money is going into that as well.
Sorry, it's not even the refugee thing, because that's a private people doing it. Okay,
not just the government is involved also.
Olgierd, there is the thing where they have the 500 plus program for which is going by the wayside, but they've had this direct financial aid to Ukrainian refugees, and that has not been cheap. So Poland may be not giving money to Ukrainian, but there's the Ukrainian government, but there's so much service happening here directly to citizens who are refugees, directly to the armed services from Ukraine coming to Poland to train. The idea that Poland should give more when it's giving as much as it possibly can is ludicrous.
Way to Ukraine, come on. Most of the transportation goes through Poland and Slovakia.
Romania is very important.
Romania also, that's a good point.
Yeah, Romania.
Phil is a specialist in this area because he's been working with aid that's involved in both of those places.
Actually, it's very interesting. How about Romania and Moldova? I would like to know that. That is interesting.
When we look at Moldova, a country with a population of roughly 1 million, and they saw their population double in the course of a month or two, their infrastructure was pushed to its absolute limits. And so even though its numbers were far lower than that which Poland took in, the idea that we can double a country's population in such short time presents a number of challenges: sanitary, logistical, supply, food, what have you.
Yeah, the other thing, that's a good answer. The other thing, when you look at Poland's aid, Poland giving more towards Ukraine, well, Poland's had to build its armed forces up. This is a huge investment. And buying in new airplanes, increasing the size of the armed forces by a couple 100,000. These sort of things. These are major expenditures. Now, Poland's economy is not even that of New York State, which is the size of Russia's economy. So Poland's got a long way to go. I'm not saying it shouldn't. It should get there. I mean, Poland should be if it were not for the war, Poland was booming. And the war has caused a fall in the zloty and a fall in investment in Poland because of proximity to danger, which includes the continuing threat of nuclear war. Because one day Putin says, or Putin, because he says there will be no nuclear war. The next day Medvedev says, we're going to blow you up with nuclear weapons. I mean, talking out of both sides of your mouth. It's the two-headed monster that has four mouths and four sides. So
it's not a coincidence that the Russian, symbolic animal is double-headed eagle.
Right. Do you think Americans, Tony, do you think Americans are going to be more isolationist or not? You're a military guy. You have security information. What's your view on this? Please, hold forth.
Americans are severely misinformed because of the media, and they are going to continue to be isolated. They are starting to realize that they need to get the facts straight, and the news outlets that are there from, I'm just going to call them out, CNN, MSNBC, Good Morning Today, Good Morning America, whatever that may be, that have been in the pocketbooks of certain sides of the United States government, are going to finally start going to tumble down. Yes, the isolationism will continue for a little bit, and I hope that the Americans will wake up, because there's a bigger world out there than just the United States, as which they know that the infrastructure that they have in the United States is not as strong as it used to be, because they have outsourced everything. And that is a global impact. That's the other thing that we have. It's a global impact. This war is impacting everything that we have. You see it here. We feel it here in Poland, because gas prices, food, healthcare, electricity. That's the other thing. They are suffering. The Ukraine is suffering. The infrastructure problems that they have are due to electrical issues to provide them heat. They have the two biggest nuclear power plants in Europe, of which Poland receives energy from Ukraine. How is Poland going to have that offset? Well, Poland this week has just signed a nuclear deal with Westinghouse.
Yes.
To actually have the first nuclear power plant up by the Baltic, up by 2025. Or not 2025, 2030, sorry. How is that going to help us out right now? No, the immediate effect is not there. So, yes, isolationism will continue in the United States, because people do not want to wake up to the fact that we are in a global economy. And because people want to still be greedy, and continue to be greedy, not only for money and power and land, we're still going to feel their effects. Unless, like I brought this up with Sir Nicholas last time, we need to grab a pair of our pants, put them back on, and check to see if we have a pair of gonads down there, and actually stand up to this fool and stop him before this continues and gets worse.
So we need to grow a pair. All right, as the sergeant says famously in Full Metal Jacket. So couldn't agree more. The other problem is that even though you're talking to a foreign policy expert, for example, in Washington, who in this case spent 6 years in the American embassy in the early 80s, between the early 80s and 3 years, and then 3 years right at the breakup of the Soviet Union, this guy still doesn't seem to understand what's going on here. It's quite amazing. Washington seems to overpower people's common sense through, as you say, this co-opting. Look, this is common. I can remember as a journalist being in a foreign country, seeing things with my own eyes, trying to report those, and then people in Washington saying, that's not happening. For example, with the sex slavery trade. For example, with my reporting from Afghanistan, tribal areas. It's like you're making up fairy stories. You're seeing it with your own eyes. In some case, you're risking your own life, and yet the people in Washington, in their comfortable chairs, are ignoring what you have to say. And it continues through policy. Plus, the political game being played in these power centers, particularly in Washington, which is the power center. Some might argue Beijing as well, but the power center. They have their own agenda, and don't come around here with your facts. We don't want to hear it. Is often the case.
Oh, if I may just drop in.
You must.
If you look at America, and there is this, I felt some kind of enmity between Europe and America in the way the guy spoke to you in the other TV program.
Yeah.
And I think they should be working towards another goal. We should invest in each other. We should strengthen our production and production ability, because Poland is not, the production is dropping again. And we need to produce more. And because we were so used to China producing everything, we moved all the production away from America, from Europe. And that's a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good point, and emphasizing again, or re-emphasizing what Tony started out saying. And of course it's true. But I'll tell you something else. I don't think America is isolationist. I think it's a quarrel about, as Representative McCarthy has said, it's mostly about accountability. Ukraine doesn't have a great record. And there's also the accountability, which I raised the point, and I'll raise it again now, of looking even at NATO. Now, if NATO can't, if we can't get the 2% of the budget from the countries in Europe over time, which they should be giving, and the United States gives much more, then how can we expect them to give more in the way of other aid if they can't even meet that? So,
if I may interrupt on that one for one quick second, and it's actually
it's not an interruption. Jump in.
Sweet. All right. So the Inspector General has is going to send in a representative to inspect the Ukrainian corruption based off the $800 billion that they've received already, and they have another 400 and some odd million dollars that are going to be going to their aid for this entire war to get them funded. However, there's an interesting article that's also saying, all right, this aid is there. How are they going to get the inspection done? How much access are they going to be given? Where has this money been put into? How has it been utilized efficiently? And that's not only money's not only the other issue, it's weapons, because there's a huge black market in the Ukraine, of which we should have been seeing a lot more of these weapons from the Western side, especially U.S.-led weapons, to be used on the field a lot more than has actually been done. Where are those weapons? The accountability for that is also huge, because there's technology that our enemies, or they're enemies of the Western side of the world, can use against the West and start making better weapons, of course, making ours obsolete at that point in time. So there's accountability on both ends, not only financially, but also military-wise. And that's also the same thing with NATO. They can't account for the amount of time and money invested that the UK and the US have invested into NATO, and that's to be seen by how the Republicans will react if they control the Senate and House. Because initially, under the Trump administration, the Republicans were for going away from NATO, and the Democrats were like, whoa, let's not do that. That was a little bit too rash. It is a bit too rash, because you're leaving your allies high and dry. But then again, on the other point, what did we just do last year? in Afghanistan. We left our allies high and dry, a country that we were vested in for almost 20 years, and we left them high and dry. What's to say that they're going to be doing the same thing with the Ukrainians? Ukrainians feel the same way right now, that the United States is leaving them hanging high and dry. Great, the aid money's there. Great, you're sending the weapons, but we need your backup, because they are now going to feel the effects of the winter. So it's snowballed into many, many, many problems.
And also, Tony, this is very good. The other thing is that Poland has every right to feel the same, because they've been left high and dry before. And that's why I want to come back to this point about the origin of the American Republic. And I don't want to make too much of a distinction between democracy and republic and what they are. Look it up. It's very clear. If you don't know what it is, I'm not talking about you, I mean to viewers. If you don't know what it is, look it up, read about it. We can't do that right here. We don't have time. But if you look back, it's very funny that America should be isolationist. That's a product of the 1930s, more than it is following the First World War. It was a reaction to the loss of life in the First World War and the cost of supplying the Europeans in that war, combined with the Depression and the desire to increase American hegemony over British hegemony in the world for American business, which needed to grow at that point. Now, the isolationism that is attributed to General Washington, George Washington, the first president, obviously, served 2 terms. He was not really an isolationist. What he said was avoid foreign entanglements, meaning treaties. He was not against intervening when necessary to protect American interests or to work with an ally in a joint interest. He was against long-term treaties, okay, which NATO would be. But that is a different world. And America had a different position then. It was before the really dawning age of 19th century imperialism, which changed everything, and both commercially and militarily. And responsibility. And then the First World War showed somebody had to come in and clean things up, and that somebody is always America. First World War, Second World War, Korean War, Cold War, etc. Now, the point on Afghanistan, another very good point, an excellent point, because not only did we leave them high and dry, and our allies and some even Americans, unbelievable that you could do that. I mean, unconscionable, but they do that. Go back to my journalist story. Those comfortable editors don't care if you're out there risking your neck, if they got to send their kids to private school and pay their bills. And unfortunately, that's what the desk jockeys, which we call them, when you're in the field, are like. It's just human nature. But what if we had taken those weapons? Tony?
Yes.
What if we'd taken those weapons and brought them over to Europe, transported them, taken our time and got our stuff out? How much money in aid could we have?
Oh my gosh! How many trillions of dollars did we spend in Afghanistan? That could have been the thing that turned the war. Instead of making it last 8, 10, 9 months that it is now, we would have given them much better equipment than the Russians have. The Russian equipment that they call them tin cans. They are tin cans. They're extremely archaic tin cans that cannot meet the mustard, defending against more likely guerrilla warfare, and that's thanks to efforts from Canadians and the United States and allies telling them and training them how and showing them military decision-making processes that to properly defeat an enemy with using small means. Imagine giving them those Humvees. Imagine giving them those Blackhawks. I mean, imagine giving them those little birds that they left there, the Huey 500s, the SEs. Imagine giving them those armaments, the millions of pounds of ammunition. Hell, let alone the money, the stockpiles of money that were left there for aid for peace, trying to raise more architecture, infrastructure in Afghanistan. That money could have easily been pulled out, the equipment brought back here to Europe, as you just pointed out, Will, to push that forward. And left right there in the Ukraine for furtherment, because now we're going to have...
Or left with allies like Poland and Romania.
Exactly.
My God, you just wonder what this so-called president was thinking. He's no leader.
He wasn't. He was being, to me, my personal opinion, he wasn't being a leader.
He's not a leader. This is obvious by his actions. Yeah. And you're a soldier, and you know these things firsthand. So it's a good point. We need leadership, but we need leadership that is not focused on luxury, greed, and corruption. When you're in politics, you have a different duty in a republic. It is a higher duty. It is a higher calling, and it cannot be affected by personal interests.
But we can't get to there without a proper system of checks and balances and authorities with courts to go after the corrupt politicians who go and do the profiteering.
Correct. So which means insider trading, etc., and as you were saying before, term limits. Go ahead, Tony.
And as to caveat to what Phil said, it's not only just the holding those people accountable and the politicians and getting rid of the corrupt ones, but we also just need to let the military leaders be the military, because the military has become too politicized, and it's actually crippled the ability for military leaders, effective military leaders, to be a military, because now they're only focusing on their career gains to be going towards the political side.
Political side, exactly right. This was a problem in Rome when the generals became politicians. My God, you know that. You studied it in the military history. I want to come back to Olgerd, though. We're running down to time. Olgerd, this isolationism, that or this possibility of isolationism, there's no way the United States can now renege its leadership. If it does, we're finished. It'll be a totalitarian world, led by the Chinese and their minions. China has its own problems. They're not a universal, it's not an overwhelming universal force. It has its own disparate elements which could bring its own downfall. But if we go back and look at this idea of no allies in the late 18th century around the founding of America, well, two of the greatest allies were from Poland, Kosciuszko and Pulaski, as he's called in the United States. Puławski is his name in Polish. These were people who found a country after their own country they were being run out of by partitions and by hideous enemies, including Russia and Prussia.
And Austria-Hungary.
And Austria-Hungary, but not as bad, but yes, the three powers. And the French also helped the United States. So it's a bit odd to me how you suddenly say, I don't want any foreign entanglements, when you just, Kosciuszko built West Point. That's where you train all your military. Pulaski and was an artillery expert. And Pulaski started the American cavalry. And then Yorktown was largely a victory because of the French Navy. So come on, people, read a few books and use your brains for a change. Stop being bureaucrats in Washington and think about things based on history and reality and what is actually in the national interest. And I think you made a great point, Olgerd. Also, we have to finish.
No,
but
what I see is
you have the last word. 1 minute, Olgerd.
Even if in the old times, not ancient, come on, that's ancient only for Americans. In the 18th century, it was not possible to have a single isolated nation, even then. And now it's simply not viable to have a country that will not trade with other countries. Unless you are Northern Korea, even Iran trades a lot. And Russia will have to trade with other countries, whatever the countries would be. So it's not possible to have an isolated country. And besides, I always ask my friends who say, Americans are the policemen of the world. Okay, would you prefer Russians to be the policemen?
Or Chinese.
Or the Chinese?
Yeah. Wiser words have never been spoken, O Grand Poobah. We appreciate your comment, and I appreciate you, Tony Gonzalez, being on the show, Olgerd Ujimbo, and Philip, Dr. Phil Goss, Phil G, Phil L, who knows? A mysterious man with changeable middle initials. Thank you all for watching, and may I say, you're looking well. Why don't you stay that way?